Welcome to Bandofla. This is episode 64. Apologies, listeners, viewers, whether you're listening on Spotify or watching on YouTube. There has been a slight delay since our last episode, but I'm delighted to say we're back. And I've got a really special guest. Viewers and listeners will be no stranger to our guest today, Emi Kayserioglu, all the way from Cyprus. Emi was on a show recently where we were discussing the recent presidential elections in Turkey. Emi, welcome to the show. We're so grateful that you've agreed to come onto the show to share with us your experiences. And I guess the first place we want to start with is when did this journey first start? What was your initial reaction to the news when it was confirmed that you had cancer that first time?
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for having me on the show, and I'll try and be as precise and as concise as I can. It was the end of September 2019, and I'd had an awful year. I'd lost my mother in January to cancer. It had been a long and arduous process. She'd first had ovarian cancer. Um, she'd been operated. I spent time with her in England, and then she came back, and then she was going for her checkups. And then during her last checkup, she was particularly uncomfortable, and I was with her. We were at the Guy's Hospital in London,
Hmm.
and she was complaining about a kind of bulge on her right side. And they said, "Oh, it's probably a hernia." They did blood tests, and they said everything was clear. And that was in November 2018. And at Christmas, during Christmas dinner at our home in Cyprus that year, Mum became very ill very quickly, and we had to rush her to hospital, where we found out that she actually had a tumor in her intestine. So it was a really bad experience, and the cancer word and the whole cancer thing had really worn me out as a daughter. I'd basically cared for her for a long time, and the resources in northern Cyprus aren't all that. So it was a really very strenuous time for me emotionally, physically,
Hmm.
and like most people, I mean, I was learning what cancer means in a very pornographic way. Like I was seeing the ugliest side. I was watching Mum suffer. I
Yeah.
was doing everything I could to help her. So when she passed, it was it was a very difficult time, and I remember I said to my husband, I feel so exhausted. I'd lost a lot of weight, and I said, God forbid if anything should happen to me, I can't cope. I don't know what made me say that, but I said that.
Mm.
And, as is, you get on with life. So she died in January, and then February, March, April, May. I was trying to get myself together,
Hmm.
get back to normal, spend time with my young teenage daughter, trying to make up for the time that I'd lost whilst caring for Mum. I mean, I really was knackered. And one day I had a very huge stabbing pain in my right breast, and I thought, well, that's a bit weird. And then it went, and then about a month later, the same thing happened. And I got a bit nervous. So my husband was away on business. So when he got back, I booked a flight to go and see my doctor, who was
Mm.
responsible for doing my checkups.
Yeah.
Of course, I did the touch thing. I felt there
Mm.
was nothing. I couldn't feel anything. So I waltzed into my doctor's office, and I said, I have a pain. And she said, okay, let's do it. And I was late by 5 months for my mammogram.
Oh, wow.
5 months because I'd been occupied with Mum
Mhm.
and whatnot. So during the mammogram, she wanted to do a scan, and during the scan, she found two nodules, two masses,
Mhm.
and it's her area of expertise. So that was my godsend, my luck.
Mm.
So she immediately aligned with a doctor.
Mhm.
He came, they did a biopsy test, and this all happened on the same day. And
Wow.
then the biopsy was sent to the lab, and she insisted that the results come back quickly, and they came. And my friend suddenly changed. She became very, very professional and very matter of fact. And she said, "Okay, we have two tumors.
Mhm.
One is a hormonal one,
Mhm.
and one is what we call a triple negative, which is the more sinister type of breast cancer. It's one that can cling on and come at any time."
Right.
So I listened, and because I was away in Istanbul on my own, I didn't really have time to think or to panic. And I'm in the hands of my best friend, who is an expert on these.
Mm.
So on the Wednesday, she arranged. I went to the Koch hospital. I had a PET scan, and that there confirmed the masses.
Mm.
The tumors were grade 3. They were very aggressive. They were growing very quickly, and they discussed, how what the pain was, and apparently one of them was so close to a milk duct, it was actually pressing against that, which is why I had the spasms, the pain.
Ah.
But that also was a godsend.
Mm.
And she immediately arranged for a surgeon. And then on the Thursday, I had an appointment with the most aggressive oncologist in Istanbul. So I went, and he looked, and he said, "Okay, we can't operate. We need to, first of all, stop these from growing. We need
Mhm.
to shrink them.
Mhm.
We need to slow them down, and then we need to operate. We need to remove them." And I had a couple more tests to see what the percentage of a recurrence would be, and that came out quite high.
Yep.
And my grandmother, my father's mother, had had breast cancer when she was in her 40s.
Really?
So it was likely that one of the tumors was something hereditary. I'm
Mm.
not sure which one. Mum never had breast cancer. So it was a whirlwind. And the gentleman wrote a protocol for me, and he said, "This is the treatment that you need. It's a very aggressive treatment, but you need to start on Monday." So this was on the Monday. I flew into Istanbul, and this was the conversation on the Thursday. And he was saying I have to start
3
chemo on,
days
on
later.
on the Monday.
Wow.
I mean, when you think about it, within 7 days,
Mm.
it's unheard of. And meanwhile, I'm trying to relay the news to my husband back in Cyprus, and he's like, "Oh, I need to find out where we're going to do the treatment." And
Mm.
the treatment was 15 weeks of chemotherapy weekly.
Wow.
And my doctor friend said, "Well, she can't stay, and she can't be away from her family for that long. She
Mm.
needs to be with her family." So it was, obvious that I would be coming back to Cyprus.
Yep.
So in the meantime, my husband's trying to find, where I'm going to have my chemo. So he's approaching the oncologists in North Cyprus, and that was one of the first things that we discovered. You can have oncologists with egos, and the oncologist, a young gentleman, didn't approve of the protocol that we were given.
Mm.
And my husband was a bit shocked. He said, "Yes, but we need to start this on the Monday."
Mm.
He said, "Oh, you come in on the Monday, and we'll have a talk." And my husband, being quite diligent, was like, "No, I'm not going to risk coming in on Monday. You might not have the drugs that have been prescribed.
Mm.
I need to know that we can move forward with this."
Sure.
And then he was unreachable. So my husband did what he had to do. He contacted a doctor in the Republic, who actually, got back to him within 2 hours with an email saying, "Yes, we fully approve of the protocol. If she had come to us,
Mm.
we would have executed the same protocol.
Right.
Yes, we can start with Miss Emina on Monday morning at 9:30 if you wish, as long as you say you're ready to come."
Yeah.
And they gave us a list of the cost. And I flew back on Saturday, and on Monday morning my treatment started. Um, so it happened so quickly, I didn't actually get a chance to feel sorry for myself, to be
Mm.
scared. It was, well, this has happened. Excuse my French, the shit has hit the fan, and I need to get on with it. And that's what I did. It was difficult. It was challenging. At times it was really painful,
Mm.
but I just got on with it. Um, I just didn't want to feel sorry for myself. I didn't want to even think about being defeated. And I basically talked to myself every evening that this was something that I was going to overcome, that
Mhm.
it would pass. Um, and my husband was a great support. My daughter was a great support. And it was then that I started to understand the fundamentals of this disease. Uh, a third of it is how you perceive the C word. The second third is the type of treatment that you're being given. And
Mhm.
the last third is the team or the people who are responsible for treating you. And these three things are such vital components in you being able to defeat and overcome the tragicness of
Mm.
this really awful disease. And in those days, I kind of started thinking about this, and that it was that helped me later on uh, remain resilient when it came
Mm.
back again and again.
Yeah.
So, in short, time, not wasting any time, finding a doctor that you can really trust and communicate with, and moving quickly, being diligent, moving really quickly. It breaks my heart when I hear about patients having to wait. This is something that for me is it's unfathomable. I mean,
Mm.
knowing you have this awful disease, not being able to be treated as quickly as you should be, you're just adding more risks to something that is already a huge
Yeah.
risk.
I think here in the UK, where we are, even though the NHS, many aspects of the NHS are struggling because of year on year lack of funding by this awful government here. But I have to say, the way cancer care is administered in the UK, and I can personally vouch for that, given what I've seen with
Hmm.
my father, who's had 2 episodes of cancer. Um, the support has been amazing.
Great.
So, but you're spot on, Emine. I think you're incredibly pragmatic. In terms of how your thought process and how you've got over that initial shock, if you like, when you were first told. Um, it's almost as if you went into autopilot
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
deal with that. Okay. I mean, in terms of your experience with cancer, how has that shaped your perspective now on life in terms of your priorities and the way you approach challenges and setbacks?
Um, it's it's helped me tremendously uh, learn about myself, and it's helped me to put myself first. During the first bout, I still had my father was alive, and I didn't want him to be sad.
Mm.
So I would be bald, and I would come back from chemo. I would
Mm.
sleep, and the next day I would be up, and I would go around to see him, and we'd talk, and we'd drink coffee.
Yeah.
And so I didn't treat. I wasn't very kind to myself. Maybe I was a little bit too pragmatic, and I was like,
Mhm.
no, this isn't gonna change me. And I continued in the way that I am. I'm someone that I tend to care too much about too many things. I
Yes.
tend to always give thanks for every minuscule thing that I have, and I always want to make sure that everyone and anyone around me um, has access to my time if they need help, if they need um, anything. I mean, this was in my DNA, and I always felt like I had to be like this, and this comes down to probably my sense of worthlessness. I mean, I always felt like you have to be a good person, and this is how life is. Um, And during the first bout, I don't think I changed.
Mm.
I was the same. And I should have learned, I didn't. And then the second bout happened. And then again, I was like, I washed it off. I thought, well,
Mm.
it's come back.
So the first bout was in 2019,
It was in 2019,
and the
and
second
then
bout.
in 2020, I luckily I'd finished the treatment,
Mm.
went back to Istanbul, waited 5 weeks, and then I had the major surgery. I had a double mastectomy,
Mhm.
and then I waited for that to heal. Then I came back, and that was just before the COVID outbreak. So that was really really lucky. And then I was really busy trying to navigate dad, who was a very stubborn 85-year-old. And I didn't want him to die. I wanted to look after him and make sure that he abided by the rules, but he didn't.
Yeah.
So that was the first bout. And the second bout, I think that happened approximately 18 months afterwards. Um, and again, it was diligence. I was doing my blood tests regularly,
Mm.
still not putting myself as a priority, but getting on with things, trying to make up for lost time with my daughter and my family.
Yeah.
And then again, when the markers shot up uh, with my oncologist, we had another PET scan, and then it showed up that in fact, yes, I had some positively charged lymph nodes. So this time I was operated in the Republic of Cyprus.
Mhm.
They removed the positive lymphs, and after that, again, I had some chemotherapy, and then after that, it was followed by some radiotherapy, which was more challenging.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I still hadn't learnt my lesson
Why do you say that?
because it was something mental. It was that
Mm.
I'm resilient. I've overcome it. I'm going to continue like this.
Oh, I see.
And as humans, we're not very well balanced. We don't know that we should be gentle with ourselves.
Mm.
We don't remember if we are not that way inclined. We often forget to be kind to ourselves and to put ourselves first. And we shouldn't compensate for the things that are missing
Mm.
uh, in our lives. We shouldn't be the first one to jump up if anything's going wrong. And basically, that's how I was, and I was still continuing in that manner.
Mm.
It was only the third time that again my markers went up. Um, and I had actually had a very it was a really traumatic episode in our lives in October 2022. In June, I'd lost my father. Um,
Yeah, that.
that was hard,
Mm.
and 3.5 months later, received a phone call that my 24-year-old nephew had died in a really tragic accident. And that was really hard. I mean, that was a very hard pill for me to swallow.
Mm.
And interestingly, during those times, I was actually on oral chemo
Mhm.
therapy. So I'm sure you have these awful tablets. So I was taking 3 in the morning, 3 at night. They're supposed to be for protection, the
Mhm.
chemotherapy. Um, they were awful, but I continued with them, and they made me feel really sick. But I didn't really pay much attention. But the episode with my nephew, that that did something really bad to me. And after spending several weeks in London trying to console my brother, my
Mm.
sister-in-law, I came back, and my blood tests started, not being very good. And then I saw
Mm.
my tumor markers elevate, and I thought, oh God, it's going to happen again. And that's when I realized that it's time for me to change. And that's when I changed. And I mean, we went to the oncologist, and my daughter had graduated from school, and she'd been offered a place at Princeton.
Wow.
Yeah,
Amazing.
and I was over the moon. And my husband was parking the car, and I walked into my oncologist's office and I said, "Look, once, twice, this is the third time." I said, "Am I going to be able to see my daughter, like, go to school? I want to bring her to school." And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, "You will." He said, "We're going to always make sure we have ammunition." But what he didn't say and what I read in his eyes were, "But you need to really think about what you're doing."
Mm.
That's what I sensed. And since then, since that last bout of chemo, I've um, I've changed. I can honestly say now I'm more grown. I'm kinder to myself. I know when to stop, and I'm not taking it for granted that I'm strong. So this cancer thing actually, it helps us become stronger and better versions of ourselves if we're lucky enough. Um, and becoming a better and stronger version of yourself is wonderful.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think there is a lot to be said, Emmy, for the whole concept of self care and
yeah.
self love. More and more people are talking about that. You know, I think it's incredibly powerful what you're sharing with listeners or viewers, and I'm sure it's gonna, you know, this is the whole idea or part of the idea of why we're having this conversation. So people can, in my opinion, draw inspiration from what you've been through, what you're going through, how you're coping,
Mm,
and the incredibly uplifting way that you're communicating your journey. It really is special. I really appreciate you
my pleasure.
sharing that with us. I mean, what did you have to make any specific lifestyle or dietary changes? Because I know oncologists.
Dietary
Mm.
changes, yes.
Yeah. What sort of dietary
Um,
changes did you have to make, and how did they impact on your health and well-being?
um, personally, I got this urge to eat lots of raw, like green things.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was like really interesting. I wanted to eat lots of salad. I drink. I just felt thirsty all the time, so I would drink much more water. Um, One of the things that for me was the most unpleasant is, chemotherapy actually affects your blood cells. Your blood levels go down, your
Mm.
white blood cells go down.
Yes.
And to try and combat that, you can't, go and have a blood transfusion each time. So I don't like liver very much, but I resorted to eating liver quite a few times in August, and it helped. So
Oh, wow.
dietary changes, if you eat healthy and eat balanced and
Mm.
and do your exercises, it really does it does affect your blood levels. And when you see that, it's you think, well, okay, there's something in there. So
Mm.
exercise, being able to move, even when you have lots of aches and pains,
Yeah.
it's really important to be active. Um, and also to believe a little bit in what you're doing. So if you're having your chemo and you're given anti-nausea,
Mm.
or if you're told to take some kind of a steroid, a lot of I find a lot of Cypriots don't believe. They take one or two and then they leave. I
Mm.
have an uncle who's like that. But I followed rigorously what I was told to do. I gargled with the special mouthwash. So if you follow the rules and the guidelines, they really do help. So that taught me a bit of discipline. So
Was you told to avoid dairy? Uh,
no, I wasn't.
okay.
But I don't eat a lot of dairy anyway. There are specific no-nos when you're having chemotherapy, but after the chemo, I mean, you're told to avoid sugar,
I see.
which we all know sugar is something. It's pretty lethal.
Mm.
processed foods. I mean, I like a sausage, bacon breakfast, so I avoid those. I resort now to eating the local Cypriot cuisine, so I have lots of börülce, the black-eyed beans,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
things like this. Always eating things from the season.
Yes.
Uh, that's really important, and trying to, there's so much, like pesticides and
Mm.
lots of stuff around, so I try and be really careful with all the fresh produce. I wash it with the soap, I rinse it, it's I mean, I'm trying to make sure that I eat healthy like that as well.
Mm. Fascinating.
Um, I like a bit of wine, so I have my, little glass of wine in the evenings. It helps me relax.
What's your preference, red or white?
Red, I don't drink white, just red.
Good, good. Okay, I mean that's interesting. I think people who are going through sort of cancer treatment will be able to relate to that kind of life, those lifestyle changes. You've kind of touched on some of the kind of motivational aspects and how your coping mechanisms, but what has been your motivation and how do you keep that positive mental attitude, which is so important?
Um, I'm not sure if it's because of what I lived with mum, because I was a full-time nurse for her,
Yeah.
and I suffered. I mean, it was very sad for me to see her going through that process. And I have a feeling, experiencing that, kind of told me that there is no way I want my own daughter and my husband to feel the way I did. Um, and I think that was a very conscious decision to make sure I continue to be the mum that my daughter knows. She's wise and she's
Mm.
intelligent enough to understand that mum's not well, that she's, got cancer. And again, with my husband, I mean, I insisted that he still go for his work, his business trips abroad. Um, and that kind of resilience uh, kept augmenting itself. It became stronger each time because then, the whole sea thing isn't the center of our life.
Yes.
It's something that it's a part of our lives. And yes, it's very unpleasant. Physically, it affects me, but that's where I draw the line. I did not want my husband, or more importantly, my daughter,
Mm.
to feel the agony of that. And I believe that we've raised a pragmatic, young, intelligent woman. And I wanted to make sure that she saw mum as a fighter,
Mm.
not as a warrior, but that I had everything under control. And this helped me a lot. So my primary motivation was trying to make life continue as normal for the two people that I really cared about, my husband and my daughter. And it
Mm.
worked.
I think you certainly are an amazing example to your daughter, and an amazing wife to your husband. I mean, just how it's so important to tell people. I often get accused of being a soppy git, but I've started saying to my parents how much I love them. Even to my sisters who I haven't always got on with.
Yeah,
And the people who are close to you generally,
yeah,
just letting them know that you love them because you never know when that opportunity will be taken away from you. So
yeah.
I'm hoping that people watching and listening will have quite a few takeaways from this episode. But I think that's a really key message that we need to get out there.
And I totally agree with you. And one of the things that I learned that I'm trying to share with a lot of people that we know who are in the same sort of 45, 50 age bracket, and it's how we love and our roles as mature people. We're not mature old people. We're not
Mm.
mature young people, but we're at the age where we're mature, and it's really important that we don't lose sight of who our loved ones are, our parents are. We mustn't parent our parents. We have to love them for how they are. We're responsible for loving them, and if needed, telling them what we think. But we cannot make them do anything that they don't want to do. And as people get older, they get more stubborn, and it's what's our role. And especially during the last bout, that was really important for me. I thought, well, I shouldn't be a parent, because I tried being a parent to dad and I failed miserably.
Mm.
And I thought, I want what's best for him. I want what's best for me because I want him to be well. But I realized it's not about that. So that was one of the really important things that I learned during the cancer era, is
Yeah.
you love people for who they are, but you mustn't. Your role has to be you. You have to be the person that you are. You cannot start parenting them, or
Yes.
if you have sisters or brothers that are irresponsible, you can't suddenly become the responsible, or the constantly telling them what to do,
Mm.
older sibling. You have to maintain that balance, because that balance is part of your inner equilibrium. So
That's,
I learned that when dad passed, because you know he kept saying, I've lived a life that I wanted to live. I'm ready to go. He didn't want to become an old man. He was full of life. And as hard as it was for me, I had to respect that.
mm.
So my biggest takeaway now is, you know, to telling people, don't parent your parents. Love them, spoil them,
Mm.
cherish your time with them, but respect who they are, respect them for all the decisions that they make, even if they're wrong, because you cannot be responsible for their naughtiness,
Yeah.
or
And I
their
mean,
stubbornness.
I find even when there's irrationality or illogical comments that you will hear, there's normally underlying reasons for those comments. There could be significant pain,
Yeah,
significant trauma, mental health issues.
I agree.
If people haven't, you take those kind of um, things away, and the individual will be, you know, on a level and be able to communicate as they were. So there's normally an influence as to why communication becomes strained, and it's something we should all bear in mind, because a lot of us will take on caring responsibilities as we grow older.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, and you've already shared how difficult that was when you were caring for your mother. You know,
Mm.
so okay, so what? This is hopefully not too tough a question, but given what you've been through, um, what three things would you tell a person who, let's say, just yesterday they've learned of their cancer diagnosis? What would be the three most important things that you would share with them, in your view?
Um, the first thing would be, get informed. Ask questions to your carer, to your oncologist. Um, Become informed so you don't live in fear. If you're informed, you'll have less fear. Number two, don't allow that to dictate how your daily life continues. Um, that's really important. And three, just surround yourself with people that make you feel good, not people who pull you down, or just people that make you smile.
Mm. Three really important bits of advice, Emmy. For people listening or watching, and you're going through a similar sort of journey, you will be able to relate to Emmy's three bits of advice very, very strongly. Emmy, you've been an amazing guest again. There's not much more
Mm.
I can add apart from just saying thank you. You're an amazing character. You know what you've been through. I think you are an inspiration to many people who know you. I can see that from how people communicate with you online. Um, Before we get right to the close of the episode, I'm going to take the liberty of touching on some issues in relation to Cyprus, because me and you are both very passionate in terms of Cypriot politics. Um, so it'd be just good to get your take on one or two things. I'm going to touch on one thing specifically, which has been making some headlines, and the United Nations have been putting out quite regular communications around the what's been referred to as the humanitarian road. Um, and it's been pointed out that there has been some inconsistencies by the UN, because a number of infrastructure projects have taken place in the buffer zone, I think. And now there seems to be a huge amount of resistance by the UN, which has ended in some quite unsavory sort of scenes. I don't know what
Mhm.
your take is on all of on what's been happening in Pile. And Pile, for people who are watching and listening, is it's quite a unique village, if we can put it that way. It's got both Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots living in it, and it's a crossing point from north to south and south to north. What's your take on all the UN stuff going on at the moment?
There are 2 points. One, I feel that I'm better informed about, that I will comment on.
Hmm.
And the second, I'm not very clear, but as you said, there are some inconsistencies with the roads, what was promised to the Turkish Cypriots,
Mm,
what has and what hasn't been done. That's kind of like a gray area.
yeah.
And that actually, until now, the previous muhtar, or the mayor of Pila, the Turkish Cypriot mayor,
Hmm.
he maintained, I'm not sure of his name, but I know that he maintained really good relations with United Nations, with the British bases, with the Turkish Cypriots, with the army. So he was very balanced. They now have a new mayor who's apparently quite aggressive.
Right.
I'm not very well informed about how he's handling his things, but obviously it's leading to estranged relations.
Mm. There's been more
The
confrontation, hasn't there?
Yeah. Now the confrontational thing was, for me, that was quite interesting, because I looked at the images, I looked at them over and over again, and I realized they reminded me of the images of June 2018, when the famous Avrupa newspaper, or Africa newspaper, had made some comments, and then a group of people had stormed the Turkish Cypriot parliament to protest against
Oh, yes.
this newspaper. And some of them even went on the roof. And it was these angry, sort of mob like grey wolf fanatics. And I thought the images are the same. It was just a sort of, because I've never known Turkish Cypriots to be so aggressive.
Mm.
I mean, it takes a lot for a Turkish Cypriot to get worked up, and to drive a forklift and to push a UN car out of the way. I
Mm.
thought, no, that's not something a Turkish Cypriot would do.
Yeah.
And I think I was right, because when I asked around, uh, it was really quite cleverly, coordinated. And those people who were actually doing the pushing around, they were an organized mob. So, I mean, that's something that, we should be more interested in. That's something that, as Turkish Cypriot media,
Mm.
they're not very strong. They don't tend to look at details. They don't tend to analyze. And this is one of the things that really annoys me. People are not informed because, the papers aren't all that great, or there are only a few journalists who actually go on to report and become diligent with things like this.
Mm.
So everything is hazy. Um, but it seems like there's a road that is being built or is being constructed at the moment. But it would
Mhm.
be interesting to also understand what's going on in the vicinity of Pire. Have there been any building permits given for the Turkish Cypriot side?
Mm.
And if so, who has given these permits? Are they doing another? Is it going to be another sort of a quick? Oh, let's go in and construct buildings. I mean, it could be. And these are things that need to be looked at,
Mm.
not just Pile, but also the surrounding areas. I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of the mayors and the local councils have been, changed since the last elections,
Yeah.
and it would not be incorrect to say that some of them are pro AKP,
Mm.
and we all know that if they are pro AKP, we know that construction and that's a very favorable way of them to
Mm.
maintain a hold on certain areas. So it would be interesting actually to follow up that and see what's happening.
Yeah.
So um,
Well, we'll keep an eye on that, and
yeah,
obviously Erdogan made an interesting speech at the United Nations just last week
yeah,
on Cyprus, and I think Turkey's now openly, I think they have been for a while, are pushing a two-state solution in terms of Cyprus. So I I think from where I'm standing, I just want to see um, a resolution. It's so sad seeing an island split in two,
yeah.
but both sides have to reach an agreement, and they seem unwilling or unable to do that. So it's just incredibly frustrating.
It
Uh,
is. There's no transparency regarding the agenda, and it's all very men in suits
yep.
with clauses. I really believe that with more civilian input,
Mm.
which is necessary, I think the civilian input could actually not dictate, but it could open up new corridors of debate, of understanding. But I'm not very hopeful. I think there are bigger things at play,
Mm.
and the construction on both sides, and the amount of foreign currency, foreign money coming in
Yes.
uh, on both sides, it basically begets a bigger question,
Yeah.
and
It's
it's
not
not
very
my
helpful.
duty
Yeah. No, that's fair comment, Emmy. Okay, we've come to the end of episode 64. Emmy, have you got any final thoughts? If we go back to the subject that we were discussing, if someone has just received that news that they've got um, cancer confirmed by an oncologist, what's your final message to
my
those?
final message is, please don't allow fear to cloud your view or your judgment. uh, Remain informed, reach out, ask questions, um, and it's not a pornographic word as it used to be. Please don't fear it. And I'm on Twitter, so if anyone wants to reach out and ask anything, or suggest something, or share something, I'm happy to do so. But my biggest message would be, please don't fear it.
Wonderful, Emmy. And just on Twitter, you can.
Emanations.
I think that's a brilliant Twitter handle, Emanations. If you want to connect with Emmy, that's how to follow her. Bandofla is also on Twitter _Bandofla. You've been watching or listening to Bandofla. This is episode 64. Do take care. God bless you all. Take care. Bye bye.